Welcome to another edition of the New York MRA Hot Seat. Today I'm here with special guest Steve Schlesinger of Schlesinger Associates. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, one of the things we like to do to start off is we give you an opportunity to take a little bit of a shameless plug. So why don't you just take a brief moment and tell us a little bit about your company?
Sure, absolutely. Schlesinger Associates has 19 offices around the world. There's 16 in the U.S. 14 in the U.S., 3 in Paris, and then 2 in the U.K., London and outside of London. We primarily focus in qualitative research, but we've recently launched a quantitative area as well. And we're basically working across all different sectors. It's been a great business, and it's been up and running for a little bit over 45 years.
You know, one of the things that I think most people that know your company know you've taken Schlesinger Associates, obviously with a lot of help, but from a small company to what I would view in our industry as a fairly large company. And so there's a lot of firms out there that are kind of struggling with this. You know, they're not necessarily sure how they should be positioned. They're being told that, you know, maybe their ways of doing business are changing. So what advice would you give, and where would you basically tell people to start when it comes to taking a small business and trying to grow it into a larger organization?
You know, I think when you're looking at growing your company, the first thing that you need to figure out is ultimately what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to become a big company spread out with lots of different services or lots of different geographical coverage, segment of the industry? And then I think once you figure out really what you want to be when you grow up, so to speak, then you have to create the plan that goes along with it. It takes a lot of time and care and a lot of flexibility. You have to be able to sit there and say, okay, I've come at it with this vision, but how's that vision going to change over time? And the other piece to me is always inclusion. How do you take that vision and include others' thoughts, opinions, guidance in order for you to create the best path forward? For me, that guidance comes from my internal staff. And then it also comes from a lot of external partners, people that I'm strategically involved with in business, clients, friends, advisors.
Yeah, that's great. So what do you think the biggest challenge is today when it comes to trying to grow a firm?
Well, I would say that there's a variety of challenges. There's obviously the financial side. How do I get it done? You have to be a little bit of a risk taker, hopefully calculated risks. But you need to be able to financially get there, and that needs to be planned out accordingly. I think that there's, the effort of coming up with the right infrastructure to do it. How are you going to support that growth? Can you do it with your internal resources? Do you need to hire more? Do you need to come up with partnerships that will allow you to get there? How much can you stretch that rubber band and still maintain its integrity? And then of course there's the issue of not losing track of what got you there to begin with. Your core business, your deliverables, your quality, everything that your clients are depending on you for. So there's a lot to sort of digest and figure out along the way.
Yeah, that's great. Now, there's a business coach by the name of John Asseroff, and one of the things that he had said is you have to have the vision first and then the plan behind it. And you kind of touched on that with your intro. So how do you begin to plan? And what do you do? What steps do you take?
Well, I'll give you going through some planning right now. And, this planning will probably take us upwards of 6 to 8 months to do. It involves, hiring an outside consultant. It involves a lot of internal debate. It involves going out to industry thinkers, people I respect and I believe have a good handle on what's going on out there, and really just gathering a lot of information and then coming up with that plan. And that plan is then debated, kicked around, understood, and then from there for us, if it involves many different, sort of what we call vision teams, people who can then sit there and create tactics and goals to accomplish those visions.
Yeah, so the one thing that I think holds a lot of people back, and it's something that I think scares people, is the idea of growing too fast. We've all heard about those pitfalls. So what are some of those dangers, and have you faced that? What are some of the dangers of growing too fast in an organization?
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty fortunate to not get significant issues. But, there are growing pains along the way. I would say that they come in two places. One is, have you hired up enough, or have you gotten the right people on board to take you to that next place? The second is your internal staff that you have before you started growing. Have they adopted well to the growth? Are they accepting of it? It's going to be a different company when you're 10 people than when you're 100. And it's going to be very different when you're, in my case, when you're 2 offices and then all of a sudden you're 19. So, you really need to communicate well. You need to understand, and you need to have an openness in terms of the dialogue, especially internally, to know where you're really hitting the mark and where you're really missing it. And then, obviously, from there, react appropriately. Our goal, of course, is always to be more proactive and try to anticipate these situations well in advance. I will tell you that today it's much easier to grow than it was 10 years ago when we really started growing fast. Now we've got the infrastructure to support a lot of our growth without hitting too many bumps in the road. Back then, it was definitely a lot harder.
Yeah, so, when you look at growth, I think the big debate that a lot of people struggle with is, do we diversify? Do we have a really targeted approach? I mean, diversification, obviously, one of the pitfalls is you lose that maybe label as a specialist. So what's your opinion, and how do you look at growth and diversification versus targeting?
Yeah, I think it's, to me, I look at doing both. I don't think the answer is one or the other. I was talking with a colleague recently, and we were talking about the core versus outside the core. And, what is it that where is it that you should be focusing, and what should be that concentration? And I believe that in our business, we have a very strong core in our qualitative practice. But again, that gives us limitations to some degree. What else can we be accomplishing, so to speak? But it still fits into our core business and our core mission. And, I think our greatest opportunities are going to probably be outside of our core just because of that situation that we're in. I think for a smaller company, I think it's always better to focus on what you do well and obviously where your strengths are. And I think outside of that may be a little bit of a challenge. But, again, you want to uncover every opportunity. You don't want to let anything sit there, and especially if it's something that you believe that you can leverage to create success.
Well, now, one of the things you mentioned that I thought was really interesting is that you said it's easier to grow today than it was 10 years ago. And, obviously your company's in a little different positions, so maybe that helps facilitate that. But when you think about the next few years, what are some of the challenges you think small businesses are going to face, and how should they be looking at growth? I mean, do you think that trend is going to continue, that it's easier to grow?
I think for a small business it's going to be difficult, to be honest with you. I wish that wasn't the case, and I think about that not just from our industry, but from most industries. There's been so much consolidation, there's so many big players out there, and they have so much more leverage in the market. It becomes hard to compete as a small company. I think about that from the local hardware store to companies within our industry. But I believe that there is great opportunity, and a lot of it is dependent on deliverables, the ability to take risks, the ability to not be afraid of failing. If I use my smarts and my ingenuity, I can go out there and create something that's special. In our industry, I actually think that it's possible because much of what we do is built on relationships, and so much of what we do is built on the quality of what you can give to a client. And small companies can do it just as well as big companies, sometimes even better. I think the hard part is that, growth today is a little bit more tricky because of the liability associated with it. Financing is harder. The ability to do things without personal guarantees is much more difficult. And people in general, because of the downturn of 2008 and 2009, are a little bit more adverse to take those risks. But I think for the person who's hungry and motivated, there's still plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, Steve, it's a near and dear topic to my heart. Ever since I started my own company, I face these issues. How do I scale? How do I grow? So I really, really appreciate hearing your insight because I know you've been there. And I think our viewers will as well. So I want to thank you again for your time and your insight. And once again, this has been another edition of the New York MRA Hot Seat. Thanks for your time, Steve.
Thanks, Paul.